Boards and booze, booze and boards, drinks and beers, fight some hordes. Drank too much, forgot our swords, ran back home, filled our gourds, got drunk again, sang some chords. Boards and booze and boards, with Mickey and Jeb.
Hi everyone, this is Booze and Boards with Mickey and Jeb. He's Mickey, I'm Jeb. Today we're doing episode 2. Finally, right?
Netrunner. Yes, I know you guys are sick of just watching Jeb play Ravenloft all the time, so I came back so you could see something new.
Yep. Alright, so Netrunner, have you guys seen it before? Maybe. If you have, well, bear with us, we're explaining it to everyone this time, right? Netrunner is an LCG.
Yep, this is an LCG by Fantasy Flight Games. It's by Richard Garfield, so hopefully you realize that name because it's huge in the gaming world, the inventor of Magic the Gathering. Also, an LCG is a format where you don't have to have any chase cards. Everybody buys this, all the same cards are in it. When they do an expansion, you buy an expansion pack called a data pack for Netrunner. All the same cards, 3 copies of each card in a data pack so that you have exactly what you would need if you want to use all 3 copies in a deck. We'll go over deck building a little bit later after we show you playing a game.
Yep, there's no like $50, $100 cards that you gotta run around and pay crazy money for. Except that if you want the tournament cards that are alternate art.
Tournament full art cards, yeah.
They're really cool looking, but...
And they are kind of jerks when it comes to the core set. There's a lot of key cards in here that they give you 1 copy of, so...
If you want to get into the tournament scene, you probably need to buy 2 or 3 starters.
At least 2,
yeah.
And then maybe you can borrow a card from somebody that's not using it, or something to that effect. But
if you're new to it, then just buy the core set and go at it. There's enough for what, 4 Corp decks and 3 runner decks, so there's a good variety you can do with just the core set.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a good job with playing right out of the box. Competitively, you might have a tough time, but assuming you like the game, it's pretty easy for a little amount of money to get into. So.
Yep. So I guess we will show the setup of the game, and hopefully that'll help you guys out. And then after that, we'll play a match and then give our review of it. So we'll see you in a second. All right. So I'm going to explain what the Corp does on their turn. In this game, it's not both players have the same deck. One person is the Corp and one person is the runner. So the Corp is an evil corporation, and they want to advance their agendas to win the game. So for the Corp, they have 3 servers, 3 central servers. The first is HQ, which is represented by their card. It gives information on how to build the deck and what their ability is. Then there is R&D, which is your deck.
This is also your hand.
Yep, this is your hand, so that'll come into play later. And then after R&D, there is Archives, which is your discard pile. So when learning the game, I just started saying hand, deck, and discard, but as you go on, you start to get accustomed to the terms. So the first thing you do at the beginning of the game is draw 5 cards. Both the runner and the Corp does this. If you want, if you don't like your hand, you can mulligan once, and there's no drawback to it, except you have to keep the mulliganed hand.
Currently in the game, there are 4 different corps?
There's 4 corporations.
Just identities. This will come in a little bit later in deck building. We'll go over that in a minute. But just they all have a different flavor, so that's another kind of interesting part of the game.
Yep. So on the Corp's turn, when it begins, you automatically draw 1 card. So every time, if you're the Corp player, you draw a card. On the Corp's turn, you have 3 actions you can do, and they're called clicks. This card is given to you in the core set to keep track of your clicks. There's a handy click marker, so on my turn I would have 3 clicks, so if I do my first, I put that there, then there, and then there. As you get more advanced, you don't have to do this, but I recommend it because it's helpful to not lose track of where you're at. So, and then there's also another card they provide that tells you what you can do with clicks. So The first thing you can do with a click is draw a card from R&D. So if I wanted to, I could spend a click to draw a card. Another thing I can do with a click is to get 1 credit. So when the game begins, you have 5 credits. So if I spend a click, I could get 1 credit and add it to my credit pool.
Which is nice because this is another game, a lot of the FFG games, you have a means for economy all the time, which is a really nice thing as compared to games like Magic and Pokemon where you can, just because of bad luck, you can get either mana screwed or energy screwed or whatever you want to call it. So a feature that both Jeb and I like in the LCGs is the fact is that we don't have to worry about economy as much. Yes, of course there are cards that are going to hinder, but as a general rule, there's something you can do.
Yep. So for another click, a thing you can do is play an operation card, and these are kind of like one-of cards. So when I play it, it goes straight to the discard. And for example, this one's Hedge Fund. What it does is I have to pay 5 credits to play it, and then I gain 9 credits. So I get those back and then 4 more. So that was the operation. Another card that I can play is a piece of ice, and ice are used to protect the servers. So when I when I set a piece of ice, I would put it in front of the server. So I could put it there, in front of HQ, or I could create a new server, a remote server, and just have ice protecting that. And I'll tell you what you can put in there in a second. I'll tell you that now. So there are 3 types of cards you can put in a remote server. They are assets, upgrades, and agendas. Assets are things that help you out. Sometimes it's economy-wise, sometimes it's drawing cards. They have a variety of effects. But what I would do is I have to play it face down, and then to res it, and resing is a term for flipping over, I flip it over, and there is a cost in the top left, and that's how many credits I have to pay to res it, and then its effect goes off. So that's resing an asset. Upgrades are the same. If I put an upgrade there, I would flip it, or res it, and pay the cost. This one is 0, so I don't pay anything. I can just flip it when the timing is correct. And then agendas are kind of the meat of the game, to score points and win. If I set an agenda face down, I don't actually res it. There is no res cost. What I would do is advance it. And advancing is another thing you can do with a click. You would pay 1 click and 1 money to advance the card. And on the back of the money, there's an advance token. So I would spend a click to pay 1 money and put a counter or an advancement counter on it. When there are enough advancement counters on it, so this one needs 3 advancement counters, and I have 3 advancement counters on it, I can score it on my turn. And what happens then is these go away, and this gets put to the side, and there's a number on there. So this one's 2. It is the number of victory points that I have.
They call them agenda points, but it's how you score the game. First one to 7 is going to win.
Yep. So I just put it to the side, and that's how agendas work.
And just a note, like Jeb said, this is the advancement cost. This is the points.
Yep.
Just so you know, the little building always means the agenda points.
Yep. Another thing to note is if I have a piece of ice here and I want to put another piece of ice out, I would put it above there, so I'm making my server very protected. But when I do that, I have to pay 1 credit for every piece of ice in front of it. So this was there before I set this down, so I have to pay 1 credit to put that out there.
So they cost 1 more after your first one.
Yep.
Your first one's free. Just moving back to what Jeb was talking about with the remote servers and what you can place in here, it's important to note that you can only have 1 asset or 1 agenda. Upgrades you can have multiple copies of, as many as you want. And the upgrades can also go on the central servers. So the only time, what this tells you is that he has an upgrade here and or an asset or agenda.
And you don't have to specify when you're playing the game. It's kind of a bluffing game, so they have no idea what I put down. And then the agenda would just be put behind those, like Mickey said.
Upgrades.
Yeah, sorry. Why did I say agendas? Ouch. Alright, so another action I can do on my turn is to purge virus counters. And the runner uses virus counters to get effects that help them out and stuff like that. To purge them, I would just clear all the virus counters off the table, and that costs 3 clicks, so pretty much my entire turn I would have to use to purge virus counters.
And what he's talking about is, this is not a virus card, I want to be very clear. But what would happen is, if I had a virus type deck, I would be accumulating counters like this. And most of the time they do, well, they might not do directly hinder him, but they might benefit me so much that he doesn't like it, or they can hurt him.
Yep.
He can take an entire turn and just go, whoop, all gone.
Yep. And then the last thing I can do on my turn for a click, it's actually a click and 2 credits to destroy one of the runner's resources if they are tagged. So tagging is another thing we'll talk about. But if the runner is tagged, then I can spend a click and 2 credits to trash a resource. So if Mickey had Katie Jones out, which is a resource, and on my turn he's tagged, I could just pay these 2 credits and bam, she's gone. So that's the last thing I can do on my turn.
But that was the same old thing, but that's okay.
Oh, was that same old? I thought that was Katie Jones. Oh, embarrassment.
Jeb just got up.
Wow. So this is a tag. So there's certain card effects that can give the runner a tag. What would happen is just I'd put that tag in front of the runner, and I know he's tagged. And there's ways for the runner to get rid of tags, but I'll let Mickey tell you about it when he explains that.
I think it's worth going over how that happens, because it's usually the corporation that initiates
A
the tag.
Okay,
Yeah, so
there's some cards, like there's an operation where you would play it, and then you would initiate a trace, which I would spend money, the runner would spend money, and if I spend more money, or if my trace is stronger than his trace, then he would get a tag. So
for each trace above what it was.
That's just one specific card.
Oh, one specific card.
So, but yeah, it ends with a tag being put on the runner. So there are cards that I can play to actively tag the runner, or there's cards where if the runner accesses it, they get a tag. So tags can pop up.
Yeah, that's true. I did say that wrong. It's not always above, but it'll tell you how many tags they take.
Yep. There are cards that the Corp can use to do damage to the runner, and damage is in the form of the runner discarding a card. So if I do a net damage, the runner would have to discard one random card from their hand. If I do a meat damage, it's pretty much the exact same thing, except some cards play off of whether it's net or meat damage. And then the only different one is brain damage, which when a brain damage happens, the runner gets this token of a brain to symbolize that their hand is now reduced by 1 card, and they also discard a card randomly. So there's 3 types of damages that can happen to the runner, and it's usually the Corp that does it to the runner.
That's usually a confusing thing for new players.
Yes.
The important thing to remember is all damage is exactly the same in terms of discard a card.
Yep.
If you do 2 meat damage, discarding 2 cards.
Yep.
If you're doing 2 net damage, discarding 2 cards.
Yep.
If you're doing 2 brain damage, discarding a card, and you take 2 brain symbols, and now your hand size has been reduced by 2. The brain damage is the only one that's slightly different.
Yep.
And pretty devastating.
Yeah, it's very bad.
All right. As Jeb said, this game, one of the things that's really unique about it is the fact that it does set up totally different for each side. As you'll notice, I get 4 clicks on my turn, but I don't get to draw a card at the start of my turn.
Yep.
Okay, so that's one of the big differences. I'm still going to draw 5 cards to start my turn. Both players always start with 5 money. Let's just say for click 1, I'll play
The equivalent of what...
an operation is called an event on the runner side. So I'm going to play an event, and it costs me 5 to gain 9, so I net 4 money. Let me back up a step, and this is my runner, which just sits there.
Gives information as well.
And it has a power and stuff, but it's not. She's not representative of my hand like in the Corp side. This is my stack, and this is my heap.
And then his hand is his grip.
And this is my grip. Okay. This over here is called my rig. This is where I'm going to set up my cards. Okay. So for another click, I could play Katie Jones. That's a resource. A resource goes in the back row. I would pay 2 for her. Katie's power is I can spend clicks to either put 3 money on her or take as much money as on her off. But I can only do one of those things
Per turn. Yep.
Okay. I could spend another click and put out a piece of hardware. I would spend the money for that. And that's a piece of hardware. Hardware stays in the middle row and does things. And there's another piece of hardware that's unique, and we're just going to point that out because this is a console. Consoles are, I'm pretty sure always, but maybe not, are limited to 1 per player. So unless the corporation is able to destroy that, this is just going to sit out here, and I'm not allowed to put another one. This one happens to increase my memory. The runner starts with 4 memory, and it can be increased by these little tokens here. And Jeb wanted to say something because he's waving at me.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. So Mickey mentioned that it's limit 1 console per player. That does not limit you to having 3 in your deck.
Right.
But you can only have 1 on the field at a time. So.
Okay, and then the last type of card that I can play, and I'll take this off because I really didn't pay for it. I could spend the last click to put that there. Okay, and this is the heart of a lot of runner decks. I won't say all because there are shenanigans you can pull. But this is, if you remember, Jeb protected his servers with what was called ice. This is called an icebreaker. It's a program, so it has a memory cost. And remember, I told you get 4 memory to start with. And there are cards that'll add to memory. But I have to pay attention to this because if I go over 4 energies, I have to get rid of one of these. There's no limit to what I can get rid of, but so I'd have to trash this, discard it if I wanted to bring something else out if I was over that 4 memory limit. So this says for 1 money I can break a barrier subroutine. And the other one says I can add to its strength. So this is probably, since we're talking about this, a good time to go over how a conflict works. So Jeb's going to grab a piece of ice and we're going to describe.
So here, I'll move this. Here is my agenda, which Mickey doesn't know it, but I just told him. And there's 2 pieces of ice, and say Mickey's over here, Corp's over here. So we'll go through a quick...
Alright, so for another click I can say I'm going to make a run on this server. And then what's important is when I'm making a run, I'm trying to get to his agendas like we showed you that he scores. I'm trying to steal them from the evil corporation. So I would say, Jeb, I'm making a run. So if I pick this server, I approach this piece of ice, and
I have the
option
to res it.
Resing it, basically paying for it.
So if I do pay for it, I have to pay the cost here, and that's how strong the program is. These are the subroutines that do bad things to Mickey most of the time.
Of course you didn't buy a barrier. Okay. Alright. This, if we look at the card, is a sentry piece of ice. I happen to be able to break barriers. This is not a barrier, it's a sentry. So unfortunately, there's not much I'm going to be able to do against this, and all these subroutines are going to go off.
Yep.
Alright?
So the first one would do net damage. X is just 1 in this example, so it would do 1 net damage to Mickey. So that means he would discard a card randomly from his hand. And then the next subroutine would go off, which is trash one program. So the Corp would get to choose what program to trash. I'm a nice Corp. I'm not going to trash his Corroder. I'll trash some imaginary program. So
No, he's not.
when those two subroutines go off, if it does not say in the run, Mickey will continue to keep going on his run.
Okay.
So
that would go off on me, and let's say that I was like, okay, fine, I took the damage. Didn't say end the run, so I keep going. Now at this point here, when I approach this piece of ice, I have the option to jack out of the system. And that just means that I can say, okay, I'm done, I don't want to risk getting hurt anymore, or whatever. If I don't, Jeb gets the option again of deciding to res this card or not. And keep in mind that he also has to have the money to pay for it.
Yep.
So if I'm running down here, and this one cost him 8, if he blew everything, thinking that maybe Mickey will just jack out if I do this, if he has no more money left, he can't do anything, and I'm just going to go all the way through to his server. But let's say he does have the money, so he flips that over. This one happens to be a code gate. So again, I can't do anything to this card, so it's just going to go off. He's going to switch one so that we can show you what happens when I approach a piece of ice that actually is what this breaks. Okay, so this is a barrier, and
its ability is it gets a subroutine for every next ice, and there are 2 next ice out, so it has 2 subroutines
that say end the run.
Yep.
Okay, so if I don't break the subroutines, I get kicked out. Alright, now, on a piece of ice, as you know, this is the res cost. This is how strong the piece of ice is. In order for a runner to encounter the piece of ice, they have to be at least equal to the strength of the piece of ice. So if you look over here on my icebreaker, I'm at strength 2, he's at strength 1. I'm clearly powerful enough to encounter that piece of ice. If, however, this was a 5, I have a ability on this card that says for 1 money, I can put the strength up by 1. So if I spent 3 money, I could get this up to a 5, and I could encounter that piece of ice. If not, basically,
the subroutines
are just going to go off, and it's going to end the run. Now, the other thing is, I also have an ability that says for a money, I can break a barrier subroutine. This is a barrier. Because of its power, it has 2 subroutines that say end the run. So I'd pay 2 money, and I would get through that piece of ice. I get to this spot.
Oh, one quick thing. If there was another piece of ice after this, when he boosted his strength, it does not stay for the next piece of ice. So the program was strength 2, he boosted it to, in the example, 5. Once he finishes encountering that, his program is back to 2 now. So if he encountered another card, he would have to boost it again.
I was going to say that, but he didn't let me.
Well.
He's like that, though.
Alright, so we were right there, right?
So we were right here. Again, I have the opportunity to jack out. And like Jeb said, unless this says until the end of the run, everything resets on it. So, yes, that's a huge deal because money is so important in this game.
Yep.
So, obviously when I get, well, not obviously, but odds are when if I made a run on here and I got all the way here, unless I was trying to do something else, I'm going to access this card. Oh, look, it's an agenda, so I get to steal it.
He steals it without paying any money unless there's an effect that says he has to pay money or something. So, and then that would go over there, and then again, whoever got to 7 first would, oh, you want to talk about that? Yeah, right. Would win the game. If, however, it was an asset. The assets have, well, any card that has a little trash can looking thing down here with a number means that if I access that card, and access just means getting to the card wherever it's from, it's either from a remote, or sometimes I can access his deck, or sometimes I can access his discard pile. It's already in the discard pile, I'm not going to pay trash cost. But anyways, if I pay that much money, he loses that card. Yep, he gets trashed.
And let's see. I think that is with the exception of this is a link. The link is how we play the trace game, and we went over memory for you. And let's see. Also, one of the things that I can do when I'm tagged is I can pay 2 money. I don't have any money left, so I can pay 2 money and 1 click, and I can get rid of a tag. And I can do that as often as I want, and I can also, one of the things that it's not an action, but some of my cards will let me, sometimes the Corp cards, but a lot of times I can force the corporation to take what's called a bad publicity. Bad publicity is like free money for me when I'm making a run. For every bad publicity he has, I get basically a credit to use during the run. And Jeb has something else that I forgot.
There's one last thing. I will try to... And these are the 3 central servers. This is going to be my hand just to represent that. If Mickey makes a run on my hand, when he accesses a card, he gets 1 random card out of my hand. And if he picked this one, it's ice. He can't really do anything, so it just goes back to my hand. If he makes another run on my hand, he would get another random one, so there is a chance to get the same card, or he could pull, I guess I didn't put any, if there was an agenda, he could steal an agenda from there. If he makes a run on R&D, when he gets there, he accesses the top card of R&D. He gets to look at it, but the Corp does not. So if Mickey looks at it, oh wow, it's an agenda, so he gets to steal it.
Right. It's also important, there's a lot of cards that let me access multiple cards, so it's important that when it gets accessed also that they stay in the same order. So a lot of times the Corp will show you, and then show you, and then show you, and as long as they don't decide to either trash or steal it, then it just gets placed back in the same order.
And when you pick them up one by one, if there is a trash cost, you have to decide right there if you're going to trash it or not. You can't look at the next 2 and be like, I'm going to trash the first one. You have to do it in order. And then the last thing is if Mickey runs on the archives, what he does is accesses every card in archives in whatever order he wants.
You need to tell him why, because you forgot to, when you discard.
Oh, yes. So here is my archives. If the Corp ever discards a card on their own, they would put the card face down in archives. Any other time it's discarded, it's face up. So there is some hidden information that the runner does not know about the archives. So if Mickey makes a run on archives like this, what he does is get to look at, or he accesses every card in there, and he can choose the order that he wants to access. So he would flip up all the face down ones, and then he would get to choose what he wants to take or access at a time. So if he sees agendas in there, he's going to be like, I will access this agenda, and he steals it. Then he's like, oh, look, another agenda. I'm going to steal that. And Mickey got really lucky, so he can steal these 2 agendas as well.
That doesn't usually happen, folks.
But the other cards that he accessed, if they don't have effects on access, they just go back to archives face up. So after he makes a run on archives, everything in archives is going to be face up afterwards. So that, I think, is the last thing that we need to talk about.
I think I'll add one more thing. On the corporation side, when Jeb was showing you how to create a remote server, I just want you to know that there's no limit to the number of remote servers that he can have. He can go, like, sometimes tables get squishy because the corporation will have so many remote servers.
Yep.
And as you learn to play the game, you'll realize why that happens. But just remember that there's no limit to the number of servers he can have. There's no limit unless a card specifically indicates how many resources I can have. I'm only limited to programs by my memory. Also, one other thing, if a card has a dot by the title of the card, that means it's unique and only one can be on the field at a time. So that's one other thing to remember.
Yep, so I think that's about everything for explanation. If you have questions, leave comments and we can answer. But we'll play a match and you can see a game in action.